Hello, I'm Svitek, and I've decided to start a weekly vlog. Now, why am I doing this? Is it self-serving? Well, hopefully not. My aim is to highlight to you my journey as a creative, and hopefully that not only teaches you, but perhaps just inspires you, or if anything, it kind of gives us a more intimate opportunity to hopefully connect and converse. And that way you write some comments about any of the things that I'm doing, so you can ask me how I'm doing them, or maybe you're doing something creatively and you have some questions on. So this is hopefully a jumping off point for those various things, so we can really help each other back and forth. That's the intent, right? We'll see how this evolves over time. That's the cool part about it. Now, this episode in particular might be a little bit longer than some of the episodes in the future. Who knows? I can't say quite yet. This is going to be very much unscripted, or very lightly scripted, and me just kind of riffing and giving you things off the top of my head. Because this is the very first episode, I'm going to kind of update you on all the things that I've got going on. And again, it's not just me rambling. I'm going to try to provide as much takeaway within those little pieces as well. So, starting off with, I should mention that my full-time job, I work for a company called Cadence 13, which produces podcasts. It's a very general way of saying what we do, but we do a lot. They do ad sales. We do production and all kinds of different things. If you want to check us out, it's cadence13.com. But in terms of me, I work full-time on the Goop podcast, Yoga Girl Conversations from the Heart, which is hosted by yoga instructor and author Rachel Braffin. She recently came out with a daily show called Yoga Girl Daily, so that's another show that I do. I've worked on Maria Shriver's show for season 1. That's on hiatus right now. I also now do Goop's secondary podcast called Goop Beauty Closet. So I work on that as well. So those are the various shows that I work on, and from time to time, I also record other celebrities' podcasts. For example, I work with Girl Boss every now and then. But what's nice about this job is that I essentially call myself a professional podcast listener. The nice part about what I do is I get to assemble all the episodes. I get all the raw audio and I piece it all together. So think of it like creating an audio documentary, if you will. I make sure it has all the right pieces and so forth. Quality control it. Obvious for those of you that are in podcasting or work with audio. When you record someone's voice, it might be loud, it might be too quiet, so you try to level everything out. So the nice part is, not only am I learning from the interviews, because the interviews are fantastic, they really are. I enjoy all the shows that I do get to work on. And I in fact have a Google tab open called Notes from Thinkers, that's just what I call it. And whenever there's a quote from one of the speakers that's being interviewed, I just jot down some general notes, or I might, write down the quote. So it's really cool that my full-time job allows me to do that. Now, part and parcel of that, what's really cool is I'm learning various things in terms of how to manipulate audio. And that excites me because as a filmmaker, I can recycle that skill set for my movies. I was decent at audio, but not great. Now, next time I do, whether it's a sizzle reel or a short film, a pilot or a feature film, I can essentially do 90, if not 95% of the full audio design. And that includes taking out hums and weird things, creating the sound effects and so forth. So there's a lot that I can do, and it excites me to be able to do that. So I really truly have learned a lot, and that's why I absolutely love working in the position that I'm in with Cadence 13. Now, on the side, I also get to do a lot, and I've been very lucky in that regard. And so one of the biggest things that's near completion is my nonfiction book. If you follow me, and I imagine if you're watching this, you kind of know a little bit in terms of what I've been doing. I do a weekly podcast called a Phil Svitek podcast, which is actually a play on the sense that at the start of every movie you see Martin Scorsese film. So I kind of took that concept and created my own version of it because I was doing a podcast. So a Phil Svitek podcast instead of a Phil Svitek film. Anyway, that's just a side little bit about that. But in doing the podcast, what I realized is there's all this information, but not everyone learns through video, not everyone learns through audio. Some people like to have the written form. And so I essentially wanted to then repurpose the lessons that I did and create a book out of it. Now, arbitrarily, I decided, let me get to 35 lessons, and then that'll be the book. And the book's called Mastering Mental Fortitude. And, my plan is to have multiple volumes of this down the line, but, in thinking about that, number one, you'd think that, okay, I already had the transcripts because I've written everything out, that it would be easy to create a book out of it. Not so much. Obviously, two completely different mediums, and so the tone of which I was writing for the podcast had to be altered for the book version, and also there's a presentation side to it. You don't want to just have text. So pulling out quotes, highlighting things, making things bold. Also, there's kind of the way it was done is this is the lesson, this is the takeaway for you. And an additional thing that isn't in the podcast currently, is kind of exercises, right? So the book also has exercises. And so it's really turned from a nonfiction book into a workbook. And it's I would say it's 98, if not 99% complete. My plan is to launch it in November as an ebook, but also with the ability for people to print because it is a workbook, and I want them to have the ability to write these in the exercises and give their answers and so forth. So I'm looking forward to that. The reason why I chose November, number one, because obviously that's kind of a date that's coming up, but number two, for my birthday, which is November 10th, I want to try to have a launch party around that time. And so rather than just have this standard birthday, if you will, by going to a bar or whatever, which is, I'm not knocking it, but I wanted to do something a little bit more and honor my creative pursuits. And, the culmination of this, having a launch party will really do that. I have always sort of been in the habit, whenever I complete something, just kind of, okay, it's done, it's off the plate, move on to the next thing. And I think that's a mistake that I'm trying to rectify, and I would encourage you, if you're in a similar position, to really take back and really honor what you have created. I was not going to have a launch party for this, and yet, this, every time I look at the book, I had to do a final revision just very recently, and there's a lot of good stuff. I don't know who's going to get the book or who it's going to help. But if nothing else, it helps me, and for me, that just completing it is a huge accomplishment. And so I want to have the party just to honor myself, if nothing else. So I encourage you to do that. And also through this process, I like I said, I picked out the number 35 just randomly and said, okay, the first 35 lessons will be this book. In hindsight, maybe I should have done a little bit less because it's almost like a 350-page book. But nonetheless, I want to kind of continue this idea. And the cool part is, in terms of the number of lessons that I've done, I'm getting close to 70. And so, in essence, I have material already enough for a second book to go right after this. And, that will be my hope, is that I can kind of just continue this in a volume form and, just bring new lessons and so forth. With the intent to bring artists as much value as I can through these various lessons, and in the book's case, these exercises. So it's really cool, and it's also, again, going back to the notion of honoring yourself, the fact that essentially I haven't done it necessarily straight for 70 weeks, but the fact that I've done something that consistent over and over is a cool thing. And I look back at that, and I wrote out each lesson and so forth, and I'm really proud. So if there's something in your life that you've been doing consistently, no matter what it is, give yourself a pat on the back. Another example for me is I've been taking French lessons through the Duolingo app, and it tracks the amount of consecutive days that you've been doing it right on the app, and seeing that number increase from day to day for me is really rewarding. And so no matter if it's a book or something, I don't want to say simpler, because learning a new language isn't necessarily simpler, but a little bit less thought, I don't know. I don't know the right word. I was going to say thought-provoking, but it's not that either. But regardless, the consistency of it all, reward yourself if you have been doing something consistent, because it really is difficult, and so I applaud you for that. So after that, I've also congruently been working on a fiction book, which is kind of about the jumping off point was my upbringing. I used to spend summers in Slovakia because that's where, apart from my parents, that's where everyone else in terms of my family is. And so I used to go there for summers, and I always wanted to honor that gift that I essentially got to spend summers there and see a whole different lifestyle and culture and learn from that. And I want to bring that to the forefront by writing a book about it. Now, what you sort of learn in translating things from your own life into fiction, at least when done well, is that that those experiences really jumping off points. It's hard to quantify, but I would say at this point, the book itself is like 25 to 30% in terms of what actually happened in my life versus 70% to 75% of just made up stuff for narrative, because the characters are an amalgamation. You want to, everything has to kind of have a deeper universal truth, and so you bring out or put characters into certain situations to confront each other when in reality that may not have happened. But where I'm at with it is I finished a second revision, if you will. I am honored that I got to work with a very great editor throughout this whole process, who's been very encouraging, and that's really been helpful in terms of getting this done. Having that sort of feedback. There's a lot of interaction between. It's a coming of age story, so that's a lot of 15-year-old boys and girls, and I wanted to have the girls have equal screen time, if you will, and at the same time be represented truthfully. So have their vices, yes, but also be strong characters. And luckily, in being able to work with my editor, she has helped me a lot through that. So I'm really grateful, and one of the biggest gratifying things for me was when she finally caught up in terms of, because I was a little bit ahead of her because I was obviously writing it and she was editing as I went. When she caught up to the end, she wrote this is the perfect ending, essentially. Now, her words are a lot more sweeter than that, which I of course appreciate, but that being the sentiment is perfect, because for a long time I was always outlining the ending. Now, in terms of how I got there, I outlined the story and then I would start writing, knowing that there was holes. And, people like Robert McKee and others will always say, outline until you get everything good. I need to, when I outline, that's the 50,000 foot view of things. And on that side of it, a lot of it makes sense to me, right? Because I can envision it. And then I need to go into the details and really start digging, on the ground floor, if you will, and in order to see the problematic areas of my outline. Now, I'm getting better at it, but I did the outline and then I wrote the initial draft, and there was a lot of problems, especially with the end, mainly because the outline wasn't as strong as it should have been. So I went back, and my editor and I, we really worked on the outline to make sure it was as strong as possible, and then I took off from there. And again, as I was writing it, I kind of altered a few things, and that's been my process overall, where I always start with an outline and then kind of dive in and sometimes go back to the outline because I have to revise the outline. Hopefully, as time goes by, I can become a lot stronger and won't have to do as much back and forth. But nonetheless, that has been my process in terms of how I write. And it's a little bit different when you work on a script, which I'll talk about because I am also working on a script. But with writing a novel, you have to. The difficult part for me, I come from a very visual medium, right, with filmmaking and so forth, and so the choices a character makes in terms of their visuals can convey a lot. With a book, you have to describe that, and you have to find very specific words of how they do that. So that's been an interesting challenge, and for a long time, I thought, man, because I looked up online of like what constitutes a book, and some people say you can just do 60,000 words, and then perhaps like the average is more like 70 to 80, at least in terms of the novel that I'm trying to write, like a coming of age novel. And I was like, oh geez, even 60,000 words. I was like, yeah, that seems like a lot. Interestingly enough, I've actually written 100,000 words pretty much, and so I've got my goal. More like 95 actually, but looking at it now, 100,000 words actually doesn't seem that daunting. The bigger question is, can it be good? And number one, where I'm at with it, I've been rereading it. I had some time away from the novel, which I recommend. I learned that from Stephen King's On Writing. So I probably had about 6 weeks since I last really saw it and read it and worked on it. And now I'm rereading it as if I'm a reader myself. And for the most part, I'm very happy with how it's turned out. It's good, right? When I said like anyone can write 100,000 words, but they're good. So for the most part, I'm enjoying what I'm reading. Hopefully that would be the case with other readers, but nonetheless, my goal is still to take that 95,000 words and get it down to 80,000. Now, it's arbitrary, but it's also not. My goal is, with the nonfiction book, I'm self-publishing and I'm doing ebook. With this, I want to try to go to a traditional publishing route. And so what I want to do, a couple of things with that. Number one, I feel like a publisher is going to say, hey, you're a first-time writer. No one's going to read a book that's larger than that, right? Let's say it equates to about 200 pages, give or take. So I want to have a 200-page book because I feel like, to give myself the best shot to be published, and for once I am published, for people to pick up the book, they're not going to want something unknown that's like, let's say Stephen King's It, where it's 1,000 pages. Not that 100,000 words is 1,000 pages, but you get the point. Also, what you learn in terms of the publishing route is publishers will read generally 50 pages. So that's why a lot of people say focus on the first 50 pages and make them as good as they can be. And which, by the way, that also kind of works for the reader as well, right? If a reader picks up a book and they're not hooked within those first 50 pages, you would think that they would take they would get rid of the book and not want to read it unless they're an absolute completist and just are like, no matter what, I'm gonna finish this book. So, what I'm proud of in terms of my book, I would say it's pretty fast paced. A lot of things happen very fast. There's a lot that happens, but everything's moving constantly. So I'm very happy with that. I'm lucky enough to have 5 beta readers, and all people whom I trust and value their opinion. I'm excited to get their feedback in the coming weeks, and then do a revision. The revisions, that's when you get more into, I can only speak to this theoretically because I haven't done that phase of it yet, but that's when you start to alter and make sure, okay, are we repeating certain things too much? Are we being too heavy-handed and should we take some things out? Are there certain metaphors that we need to strengthen? Are there certain plot lines that need a little bit more? Like the idea of Chekhov's gun, right? In order, if you're going to have a gun go off in Act 3, you need to introduce in Act 1. Like, do we have those types of things based on what the story is? So, all very, very exciting stuff that I'm working on. Then I mentioned I'm working on a script. So, writing a novel is vastly different than a script. A script is, at the end of the day, a template for something that will be created in it's for a different medium. Whereas the novel is the final product. That's why I wanted to do a novel, because at the end of the day, I knew I could write scripts, not saying in terms of quality, but just saying I could put them out, but it wouldn't be the completed form. With a book, it's completed form, and so I had the idea for the script, and I wanted to make this into a film, but I said, you know what, this idea, it's a little bit too ambitious in terms of what I'm able to do at the moment, so let me just write a book, and then at the very least, no matter who reads it, at least it's in its completed form, and if I should be so lucky that it takes off, then I could, of course, always make the movie later on down the line, if that's what's supposed to happen. But, in this past year, I've been reinvigorated to create video content and so forth. I'll talk about how on the side I've been working with various friends that are creating narratives. But, I had this idea came to me about what I can do. I wanted to shoot something in downtown LA in public places and so forth. And so I had this idea, and I got my friend Taylor Gates and John Comerford together, and I talked about the idea. We kind of outlined it, and then now I'm working very specifically with Taylor to create the script. I've always intended. I initially asked 6 people, the 6 kind of main characters. I asked my friends who are actors, and I said sight unseen, basically, would you want to do this role? If once you see the script, you're not interested, that's fine, but just as of now, is this something that you'd even want to do? So luckily, all 6 people said yes, and so I wrote with them in mind, and with the idea being that I was trying to play to their strength while also sort of stretching their acting abilities. Hopefully, because at the end of the day, they want to have a good product too. So I kind of played with both sides. It's tough to say what revision we're on, because sometimes we make minor changes and then scrap that and start at the beginning again. But Taylor and I are very near completion of this next draft of it. So Taylor and I spoke actually earlier today, and we both decided that I'm going to complete this draft. She has notes that will be affected a little bit later, but I'm going to send this version to the actors, so that way they can read it, because it's vastly changed since we did a table read with them. And our goal is to, as quickly as we can, start rehearsals and then get to shooting. Now, I want to get to a point with the rehearsals where we have it down so specifically that when we go to shoot, we can get it in 1 or 2 takes. And through these rehearsals, my goal is to work with Taylor, and any script changes that need to happen, we can do them. Now, the nice part is, obviously, we're seeing this live. It's one thing to kind of envision how each of these actors will play their character, but then to see it in action, we can even get more nitty-gritty and alter the script based on them, and in fact get their input to be able to do it. So I'm really excited for that. So those, in terms of the writing, those are the things that I'm doing in terms of the writing. I had to, by the way, if you see me looking down, it's because I wrote down these various things, because I wanted to make sure I hit some stuff. And what you learn, I said that there would be takeaway. So in terms of takeaway with the script, I'm very lucky that I approached the actors and, was able to think with them in mind for the characters. The other thing that you sort of learn, and this is just always going to happen, the first draft that you do, you're going to overwrite no matter what. You kind of saw hints of that with the novel. I said 95,000 words. We're getting down to 80,000. With the script, you overwrite dialogue, you overwrite certain scenes, and so as you revise, what you're really trying to do is sculpt away this block of stone, if you will, into a sculpture, right? If that metaphor can apply to this. So, that's what we're doing, and that way you're left with the idea, especially because with a film, sometimes, you have the characters saying certain things, which you sometimes they need to say certain things, but other times you can show it visually. And when you want to say the most, you want to have the most impact with the least amount of words. So that's what I always try to do whenever I do my revisions. Obviously, I try to do that when I first write the draft, but nonetheless, like I said, we all tend to overwrite, and then through the revisions, we parse that away. So, and whenever there is dialogue, I try to look at it like, how can I tell this visually instead? I always challenge myself to do that, so that way it's more compelling. And whenever you write exposition, this is something I learned from Robert McKee, use exposition as ammunition. So a character should be using knowledge of something that is or has happened and using it against somebody. So, for example, you would never want to say like, oh, remember that time that you and I played soccer and you missed the penalty kick in the shootout? Okay, that's very boring. Instead, you want to arm that and have one of the characters be like, hey, you always tend to do this. You always overthink things. Remember when you took that PK in the shootout and you missed? It's because you were overthinking, and you're doing the same thing now. See, there's a dynamicism in the latter versus the former. So that's how I approach the script. Anyway, I'll keep you updated on that. Right now, the working title is Idle, Idyll. So I won't reveal too much because I always like audience to be able to sort of see things, and I don't want to give away too much. But I'm excited to start shooting this movie, putting it together, and getting it out there in the world. Then the other thing that has been very interesting for me is I've been creating a product. For a long time, I wanted to try to figure out how to create an automated business that could earn me some extra income. Now, there's various ways to do this, but I didn't want to just basically buy and sell pens. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but to anyone that's sort of doing that thing. And what I mean by that is basically take a pre-existing product and just buy it and resell it. I wanted to create something new that doesn't exist in the market and then sell it. So I've been working on a human bed that has a kennel as well as storage. So for people that live in, let's say, New York or Chicago or so forth, they would have the ability to have this bed and have lots of long-term storage, and also be able to kennel their dog. Now, it's designed for small to medium dogs, and people might say, well, if people with small dogs, they want to sleep with them in their beds, right? I get that, but what about when you're out and about? You're not going to want a kennel in your apartment taking up more space, so now the kennel is already built in to the bed. So it's been an interesting process of figuring this all out, getting a prototype made, and so forth. It's really taught me a lot, and that's part of why I wanted to go through this exercise. And what's been really cool is that they say a prototype's going to cost you $30,000 and so forth. I've been, I said, A, I don't have that kind of money. B, not a chance in hell. I want to ask various people to invest in me without me having a product or having gone down this road. That's a lot of money, and even if it's a lot of people giving just $5, I feel like then I would have let down a lot of people if this didn't work out. So instead, I've found a way to really hedge my bets, and one of the things that was important for me was to work with a U.S. manufacturer. Number one, because of the language barrier, I didn't want to have to deal with manufacturers in China. Number two, I wanted people to understand the vision and be able to converse with them, and obviously the price point and the margins aren't going to be as great, but that wasn't my intent. And having kind of a made in America aspect to the product was really important to me, right? People always support your local community, they always say, and so if nothing else, I want to support jobs in America, and so I figured this was kind of a way of doing it. And so through this company called Makers Row, I found a manufacturer that I'm working with to develop a prototype. We're still in the prototype phase. It's a long and arduous process, but nonetheless, it's getting there, and I've learned a lot in terms of wood, and you'd be surprised in terms of all the things that you can learn. And I've been open to the entire process, and they've been lucky, or I've been lucky, I should say, in terms of then teaching me and so forth. So I'm really lucky in terms of that, and I'm excited to share with you as time goes by my entire journey, because I think ultimately, we all have to subsidize our dreams. I'm lucky enough where I mentioned my full-time job is within the entertainment industry, but some people aren't so lucky, and so if you can even supplement just a little bit through an automated business. In an automated business, what that really means is that you only have to work on the business. In terms of the marketing, let's say the logos, the design, and so forth, how you want to handle products and so forth. But the main day-to-day in terms of the purchase orders, the manufacturing, the shipping is all done by somebody else, and you don't even have to see it, touch it, or whatever. So that's what I mean by automated business. And it's a concept that I really started getting interested because of Tim Ferriss and his book called The 4-Hour Workweek. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with that. The other sort of product that I developed, if you will, not that it's that novel, is a shirt. The shirt is not the novel part. So between myself, Khalil, Abubu, who I collaborate with a lot, Daryl Kristen, Alina Vision, and Julia Vibert, we came up with this idea to have a campaign shirt that takes Donald Trump's Make America Great Again design and flip it on its head. And that said, instead of Make America Great Again, it says Not Twice. Meaning, we're of the mind that, vote for whoever you want, just don't vote for Donald Trump, because we don't want him in office twice. So that's on Amazon as well, and it's been pretty cool because for us, we're taking the proceeds and donating it to voter registration, not charities, but organizations, right? So if you're interested in that, and if you're of the same mindset, I don't necessarily want to get too political, but I think it is important to use our platforms in the right way. So nottwice.org is where you can get that t-shirt if you want to be part of this. Anyway, I also get to work on side projects, and it's been very fulfilling because I always learn something a lot. My friend Alina Vision works with the Recording Academy, which is the company that does the Grammys and so forth, and they actually do a lot over the year. For me, I was like, the Grammys, but they do a lot year round. And so I've gotten to work with them, whether shooting stuff, whether editing stuff, so I've been really lucky in that sense, and it's been a blast to be a part of, so thank you, Alina. If you like music, I really encourage you to check out some of their stuff, whether it be on Instagram or on their webpage, so forth, their YouTube channel. They've got a lot of great content with musicians, so definitely check that out. I've also been helping some clients kind of get videos started. So, for example, Emily Morse, better known as Sex with Emily, she has a SiriusXM show and podcasts and all this other content. She wants to do more videos, so I've been lucky enough to be able to help her. And I think, one of the cool things about her is she's just got this great passion, this energy, and I think sex is something that we're not really talked about. We're not really taught well in terms of school. Even when we have sex ed, it's more from a watch out, danger perspective, rather than, for example, in Sweden, they look at it from a responsibility as well as pleasure standpoint. And I that's what I love about Emily Morse, is that she's able to bridge those two and get people talking, because it's obviously an important part of a loving relationship in terms of loving partners. Obviously love there's various forms of it, but in this sense, you know what I mean. And then the other part, I've been getting to work a lot with my friend Khalil Abubu. He's got Shoot Your Shot, which finally came out. That was something that we actually did a couple years ago. So I'm excited that that's finally out. He's got Tell 'em About, which is this cool concept where he poses various questions. And in this case, it was all comic book themed for season 1 of like, why is Shazam getting a movie before Static Shock? Or, what's the difference between slavery and Pokemon? And so, these sort of questions that hit a deeper meaning, if you will. And so that season we did together. It came out. I helped produce, and I'm really proud of it. And he's got some other concepts in the work that I get to be a part of creatively. So it's been a lot of fun. And what, you can check out my interview with him on my podcast. And in terms of that, the biggest takeaway is like he was just like, he had these ideas and he went for it. Now whenever we talk privately, he gives me a lot of credit. He's like, thank you. And I appreciate that. But in a lot of ways, he's been very inspiring to me, because he's the type that was just like, I'm going to go out and do this no matter what. Like, obviously, I want it to be as big and grand as possible. But if I don't have the money, well, let me create some sort of other way to, to tell the story that I want. And so he's been able to do that. And I'm really excited about that, because he's inspired me to essentially, the reason why I'm writing the script that I'm writing is because I'm like, you know what? I have people like him in my life who we can put this together and we can get this made. So I'm really excited. I'm almost done, a couple of quick things. I always love to read, so right now I'm reading The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I realized I was reading a lot of white male authors, and so I'm actually now trying to diversify my fiction reading as well as my nonfiction reading. I generally tend to read a fiction book and a nonfiction book at the same time. Generally, I might supplement the nonfiction book with an audio book as well, just to get through it a little bit faster sometimes. But the fiction books, I tend to read just the book itself without never going to the audio side of it, simply because my goal is to write more fiction books in the future, and so I want to really learn the craft. Whereas I don't want to say I know the nonfiction genre 100%, but I feel like I know it certainly better than the fiction genre. So The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison is what I'm reading, and Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza is a book that I'm at the cusp end of in terms of the nonfiction books. And I've got a whole list of. And by the way, I invite you to send me book recommendations. Like I said, I'm trying to diversify and not just read white male authors. That goes for both fiction and nonfiction. So anything you've got, please comment down below or hit me up on social media at Svitek. And lastly, I've decided to do a lot more content in hopes that something resonates with you and helps you in some sort of way. I'm going to be doing a lot more quick tips throughout the week. I'm, of course, going to be doing the podcast. I'll kind of create this blog as well. The nice part for me, like selfishly, instead of journaling, this is kind of my way of being able to capture where I'm at in life. So it's going to be interesting, and I'm also going to be doing. Every Friday I want to start and do a series where I take 100 of the greatest minds and geniuses throughout all of history and highlight their success very quickly, but then talk about the biggest mistake they've made. Not to crucify them, but to show that they were once people too. And in fact, anyone who's ever created that's what's so amazing, is that anyone who's ever created something is a human being, and they were able to do that, and there's a way through that. And in fact, a lot of times it's through their mistakes that they were able to get to the thing that they're known for, their legacy, but it's not highlighted as much. And so I want to demystify these 100 greatest minds, so that way, again, not to bring down their pedestal, so to speak, but to actually honor them more and say, like, they were human just like you and I, and look what they could do, and in turn, look what you can do, right? So I'm going to be doing that series starting Friday, so committing to that. And on a more personal note, my grandmother passed away very recently. I forget the exact, let's say not this past week, but a week or so ago. And one of the things that I look back on is she really taught me, among thousands of other things, but how to really learn. And I think that's one of the more incredible things that schools don't teach. And so I'm very honored that my grandmother taught me how to learn and gave me a passion to learn. because I carry that with me every day. So anyway, that's all I have. By all means, I encourage you to comment below of anything you'd like me to talk about, anything that you have questions on in your own life. If I can be of assistance, by all means. If you want to try a coaching route with me, we can do that too. I love working with creatives and so forth and making things happen. So, ask anyone that knows me. I'm always willing to help, and that's why I'm creating more content, so that way, hopefully, I can share more stuff with you that is of benefit. Anyway, thank you for watching this, and bye.